The Time Trap by Henry Kuttner, written in 1938. Chapter 1. The Green Monoliths. Kent Mason stumbles to the top of the ridge, staring about him with sun-swollen eyes. His cracked lips twist wryly as he views the endless wilderness of rock, the death trap of the Arabian desert, dimmed now by driving gusts of icy rain. In the valley below him, two pinnacles of rock tower, and as Mason stares at them, a curious expression creeps over his sunburned face. He recognizes the great obelisks, and recognizing them, knows that his search and his life will end almost simultaneously. For before him lies the fabulous twin towers of the lost city of Al-Bakr, ancient metropolis of lost wisdom, a city of science. 2 months ago, an expedition had set out from the port of Mirbat to search for Al-Bakr, and for 2 months has been vainly pushing on through the arid waste that the Arabs call the Rub al-Khali. Old Dr. Cordell, the leader of the expedition, has pinned his hopes on legends, obscure hints, and archaic shards, but mostly upon a tablet which has been recently uncovered on the site of primeval Ur, the import of which was that a remarkable state of civilization had been attained in the Forbidden City. According to the inscription, Al-Bakr had been merely a little visited town in the great desert until suddenly, inexplicably, fantastically advanced arts and sciences began to flourish there. But this perfection of science died almost as swiftly as it had been born, for a reason that was either not known or not set down, and the great days of Al-Bakr were over forever. It was, in fact, a compressed version of the Atlantean legend, an advanced scientific culture destroyed by some mysterious doom. Mason, the archaeologist of the party, was also the youngest. Now, through the irony of fate, he had accomplished, unguided and lost, what his colleagues had despaired of doing. Dr. Cordell had decided to give up the search and return to Mirbat, and when Mason, determined to investigate a little-known mountain range nearby, had insisted on one last try, Cordell had refused to permit it. That morning Mason slipped away from camp, taking a speedy camel, thinking he could reach the mountains and rejoin the slow-traveling party in a day or two at the most. But his plans had miscarried. The camel had fallen, breaking its leg, and the compass had been smashed, and for 3 days Mason had been lost in this desolate, sun-baked inferno. The water had not lasted long. He had shot a vulture and forced himself to eat the tough, stringy meat. Then, during his nearly delirious wanderings, Mason had lost his revolver. Now, hollow-eyed and exhausted, he sees beneath him Al-Bakr, city of science. The centuries have left little of the fabled metropolis, two giant pinnacles protruding from the drifted sand, a riven block half buried here and there. That is all. Grim and desolate in the drenching rain, the valley lay lifeless and silent below. Yet there will be shelter there, and the storm is momentarily growing fiercer. There are a few storms in the Rub al-Khali, but they are cataclysmic in their fury. Lightning forks above Mason. He makes his way down the slope, staggering in his weakness. The tumbled fragments of masonry seem to increase in size as he draws nearer. The city in its heyday must have been an awe-inspiring sight. Thunder snarls behind the hills. The two obelisks are not far apart and provide some shelter. Mason collapses against one of them and breathes a great sigh of relief, for his aching muscles are relaxing. Then suddenly his lean face is alight with interest. The surface of the monolith against which he leans is not stone. Rough, worn, pitted with the teeth of age, it is nevertheless unmistakably metal. But what race of people could have reared these tremendous spires, nearly 40 feet high? The thing is impossible. Mason examines the texture of the metal, frowning. He does not recognize it. Hard and rough-grained, with a peculiar greenish tinge, it is apparently some unfamiliar alloy. Ominously thunder growls overhead, then without warning lightning strikes. Like an incandescent white-hot sword, it races down the skies, enveloping the twin spires in blinding brilliance. Mason feels himself lifted, flung aside. He has a temporary, momentary glimpse of a sheet of roaring, flashing flame playing between the two pinnacles. There is a moment of unendurable tension, as though the air is becoming surcharged with electricity. Then there is wrenching agony that tears at the fibre of Mason's being, agony such that he shrieks aloud and knows that no sound comes from his paralyzed lips. He feels a surge of incredibly swift movement. Blackness takes him, blackness and vertigo, and then quickly the shadow flies back and vanishes. Blazing light flares into his eyes. The desolate valley of Albuquerque is gone. Gone is the drenching rain, the growling of thunder overhead, the wet sand beneath his body. He lays on his back, staring up with amazed eyes at a tremendously high roof, lit with strange green brilliance. And towering up toward the arched ceiling are the monoliths. The twin towers, but changed. Gone are the scars and pits of centuries of erosion. Their surfaces are smooth, glistening with greenish sheen, and beyond them march row upon row of fantastic machines, shining and brilliant in the strange light. Mason has never seen such machinery, can only guess at the purposes of oddly shaped pistons, wheels, and tubes. The room is wide, circular, paved and walled with white stones. In the walls at intervals are set bars of some greenish substance that glows with cold flame. Mason puts a hand out, touches the smooth surface of the green monolith beside him. The touch is reassuring. He isn't mad, he tells himself desperately. The lightning stroke must have unleashed some undreamed of power in the mysterious towers, wrought some astounding change which as yet he cannot understand. He gets slowly to his feet, half expecting the incredible scene to shift and change to the rain-drenched desert valley. Behind him, a voice barks in a deep question. Mason turns quickly. A man stands near, swarthy, stocky, in loincloth and sandals, startlingly pale, blue eyes set in a harsh, weather-beaten face of seamed tan leather glare at him. A great beak of a nose juts over the thin-lipped mouth. Again the man snarls his question. Madness, for he speaks the ancient forgotten Semite tongue, the purest form of the root language of Arabic that has not been used save among scholars for some 4,000 years. Some faint inkling of the truth sends the blood dropping from Mason's head. He braces himself, searches his memory gropingly. He knows the root language. I come from a distant land, Mason says slowly, tentatively, eyeing the great scimitar the warrior carries. None may enter this city, the other responds, Ferine eyes gleaming. The master permits none to enter Albuquerque or to leave. Albuquerque, Mason casts a switch glance around. Is it time, after all? Not the changeless thing science has thought it. He has been flung back into an incredibly distant past by some strange power in the lightning-riven monoliths. Yet these machines, the very masonry beneath his feet, bespeaks not of the past, but the powers of the distant future. Mason eyes the warrior, feels a tug of recognition pull at his mind. He says, Albuquerque is not your home. The man grunts. It takes no magic to know that. I am a Sumerian. Mason's jaw drops. A Sumerian, that mysterious archaic people whose civilization has existed in the Euphrates-Tigris valleys long before the Semites have come conquering. The warrior, suddenly suspicious, moves forward, his movements cat-like, the gleaming scimitar menacing. Swiftly, Mason says, I mean no harm. By El-Elil, I swear it. The Sumerian's eyes widen. He stares. El-Lil? You swear by... Mason nods. He knows the reverence in which the Sumerians hold the name of their chief god. I've no wish to be your enemy. A surge of weakness strikes him, the culminations of 3 days and nights in the terrible Ruba el-Khali. Mason feels his muscles relaxing, tries vainly to keep his balance while a veil of blackness rushes up to overwhelm him. The Sumerian springs forward and puts a great arm around Mason's shoulders, supporting him. The warrior thrusts his scimitar back in its scabbard, catches Mason in his arms as though the archaeologist is a child, and lifts him. The Sumerian bellows an oath. Now by Baal and all the other milk and water gods of the north, he concludes, I fight no man who swears by Enlil. Dimly, Mason is conscious of being swung across a brawny shoulder, carried through interminable green-lit corridors. He is too weak to resist. At last he is deposited lightly on a mound of furs. He feels a liquid trickling between his lips, clutching at the flask the warrior holds, and lifts it. Water. No, not water, though the liqueur is tasteless and very cold. Energy seems to trickle through every fiber of Mason's parched body with the fluid. He drains the flask and puts it aside. His weakness is gone. He sits up, staring about the room, bare, stone-walled, carpeted with furs. The Sumerian puts down the flask with a rueful, thirsty glance. Now who are you? Nobody in this cursed land knows of Enlil, and you are no man of Sumer. Mason chooses his words carefully. I come from a distant land, a land far to the west, where Enlil's fame has traveled. How I came here I don't know. The master would know. How are you named? Mason. Maison. He rolls the syllables upon his tongue, giving them a curious guttural sound. And call me Eric. I was born in the city of Eric, and sometimes it isn't wise for men to give their own names. If I ever leave this city, it would not be well for men to know that I once served Greder Klon. The Sumerian's harsh face darkens, and he sends a suspicious glance toward Mason. You know the master? Before Mason can answer, a thudding sound beyond the door. He is startled at the expression that flashes over Eric's face, in which fear and resentment are strangely mingled. The door opens. Framed in the portal stands a metal man, 7 feet tall, barrel-bodied, with 3 jointed legs of silvery metal, ending in flat, broad metal plates. The thing stands there, watching. Rubbery, tentacular arms dangle loosely. The head is a metal sphere, incongruously small atop that bulky body, featureless save for a multiple-faceted eye. The robot stares. The Sumerian does not move. Mason sees the sinews of his right hand crawl beneath the skin. Imperceptibly, the hand edges towards the hilt of the scimitar. The robot speaks in a flat, toneless voice. The master summons you. Come at once. It turns, retreats, and the door shuts silently with a new muttered oath. Eric relaxes on the furs. What was that? Mason asks, feeling a nameless terror stir within him. The metal creature had seemed alive. One of the master's servants, says the Sumerian, getting to his feet. One of those he created. Powerful is the master. Irony tinges his tone. Well, I must go, he went on. You wait here. I'll be back as soon as I can. Didn't that robot see me? Mason asks uneasily. Eric shrugs. Enlil knows. Sometimes they see nothing, sometimes everything. I'll be back soon enough, and we'll find a hiding place for you. There's no time now. He hurries out, and Mason stares at the closed door, trying to integrate his thoughts. Unconsciously for the last quarter hour, he's been trying to convince himself that this is a dream, a hallucination born of delirium. But he knows this is not so. The reality of this strange city is clear enough, and Mason is young enough to realize how elastic are the boundaries of known science. Time is not fixed, unchangeable. In theory, it would be possible to travel into the future or the past, and if in theory, why not in fact? Strange, yes, and incredible and terrifying, but not impossible. Furtively, Mason runs his hand over the smooth surface of the metal wall behind him, smooths the furs on which he sits. He feels a desperate longing for a cigarette. There are so many things unexplained. This fantastic city, ruled by a mysterious master of whom the Sumerian is seemingly terrified, that tie in with the known legends, but it explains woefully little, and it does not tell Mason what he most wants to know, whether he is among enemies or friends. A noise in the corridor brings Mason alertly to his feet. Some vague impulse makes him open the door, peering out. A robot is advancing along the passage, still almost 30 feet away, and Mason quickly closes the door again, flattening himself against the wall beside it. The creature might pass, but there was no assurance of that. The footsteps stop. The door opens under the pressure of a metallic tentacle. Flattened against the wall, Mason sees from the corner of his eye the monstrous looming form of the robot moving forward. It has not seen him. The creature crosses the threshold and abruptly halts, as though realizing Mason's proximity. But the man has already sprung forward, thrusting at the robot with his shoulder, attempting to squeeze past into the corridor. He does not realize the frightful power of the thing. Even caught off balance, the robot is immensely strong. It wheels and the arm tentacles grip Mason, pulling him back. He tries vainly to fight free. The creature holds him effortlessly, and one coiling limb slides out to close the door. That done, the robot stumps forward into the room, dragging Mason with it, ignoring the man's struggles. The faceted eye glares passionately down. Then Mason catches sight of the empty flask he has drained, that has been flung aside carelessly by the Cimmerian. It is lying within easy reach, and with a quick lunge he snatches it up. His fingers tightening about the neck, the robot's eye is not high enough to reach. Mason's arm curves in a swift arc, sending the bottle smashing viciously forward. Glass showers his face painfully. He puts all his strength in a frantic attempt to wiggle free, managing to tear the last tentacle from its anchorage about his waist. The robot blunders forward, smashing against the wall. Its eyes shattered. Mason sees it is blind. Swiftly he gains the door, creeps out quietly into the corridor. Behind him comes a thunderous crashing as the robot pounds against the room, reducing it to a pulped wreckage. Mason glances around. The passage is empty. He cannot wait here for Eric. If one robot has been sent, there will be others. Choosing a direction at random, Mason moves cautiously to the left. The corridor is broken at intervals by doors, but he does not try them, fearing to alarm some inhabitant of the city. But he is given no choice. The distant pounding of feet comes mechanically, running towards him, and Mason guesses that additional robots are arriving. A turn in the passage hides them from his sight. He hesitates. Perhaps the ruler of Albecker, whoever directs the metal men, is not an enemy. The robot had not actually attacked him. It had merely tried to subdue and capture. If he submitted peacefully... But as the hurrying feet come closer, a wave of cold horror chills Mason, and on impulse he opens the nearest door and slips through, closing the panel behind him. His eyes examine the room as he hears the robots race past, and almost Mason cries out in amazement as, for the first time, he sees a woman who is called Nervor, the Silver Priestess. End of chapter 1.